All right, hello, my wonderful students. I hope you're having a good semester and that you're learning everything. So we are continuing in Chapter 6, and we're going over systems. And this is Lesson 6-3B, so it's like a part 2 of elimination. We're going to call it subtraction, but it's going to be very similar to all of our lessons on elimination, right? So what I'm going to do is I want to step off to the side, and I want you to copy these two systems down. All right, so now that you have these copied down on your paper, I want you to look at them for a moment and see what is the difference between these two. I'm just going to go stand over here to give you some time to ponder that question. What's the difference between those two? Sorry, I must have nodded off right there. All right, so you probably already saw it because you guys are so intelligent, so smart, right? Is on elimination, the most important thing is to find opposites, right? We have to find opposites. Right? We have to find opposites. And that's probably what you noticed. Over here, here's our opposites. Right? Same number, they're both 2's, and they're different signs. One's negative and one's positive, right? Now over here, though, we have that problem. There's no opposites. Same numbers, but they're both positives. These guys aren't even the same numbers. So the main difference was opposites. This was with opposites. Oops, spelled it wrong. And this was without. And let me show you what not having opposites does. So over here, I'm going to move that down a little bit. Is when we have opposites, the 3 and the 4, because they add up because they're not opposites, so that's a 7x. But remember, the reason this is called elimination is we have to eliminate either the letter y or the letter x. And if you have opposites, these get eliminated because they actually add up to a 0. And you don't have to show me the 0, but they add up. And then we come over here, we go 10 plus 4 is 14. But most of you just skip down to the step where it says 7x equals 14. And we can solve for x because one of the variables was eliminated. And that was the old lesson, right? Well, today's lesson is, well, watch what happens if you do not have opposites. So the 3 and the 4 still add up and make 7x. But when you don't have opposites, well, 2 plus 2 is 4. And then we still get 14. But we can't solve this. Right? There's an x and a y. We have to get rid of one of those. So, I'm going to show you in today's lesson when we do not have opposites, but we at least have the same number. Okay? So it's going to make it a little bit easier. If we have the same number, but say they're both negative or they're both positives. Because remember, we have to have opposites. Same number, but they have to have different signs. So today's lesson, so draw an arrow, and I'm going to make some equations. So do that, and we're going to put our examples right on down there. All right, so here's our first example. It says 4x minus 7y equals 3. And then we have an x, which means 1. So 1x minus 7y equals 15. Right? So that's our system. And what you've probably noticed is the x's are completely different. That's fine. Our y's at least have the same number, but they're both negatives. Which means if I try to add them up, it won't make a 0, it will actually make a negative 14. And this will make, so if I leave these alone, I get 5x minus 14y equals, and then that would be 18. And this is no good, okay? So that's no good. Right? No good. So, because why? We're missing opposites. So, take a moment, get this written down, and then I'm going to have something over here. I'm going to show you how do we actually obtain our opposites. All right, quick note, I actually wrote down the problem wrong. It said a positive 15, so make sure it says negative 15. So this needs to be a negative 15. So it was x minus 7y equals a negative 15. So make sure that gets changed. But again, that would change this and make a negative 12. But again, it's still no good because we don't have anything being eliminated. So I rewrote some things. So write a little arrow, maybe copy this down. So hit pause right now for a moment. All right, so I'm going to keep the first equation exactly the same. No changes made here. Okay. Now, I need to get opposites. Well, the best thing for an opposite is the number negative 1. And what we're going to do on the bottom ones, we're going to multiply or times by negative 1. So I'm going to kind of show it over here also. So I'm going to put a large negative 1. And what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to times it by everything. So I'm going to go negative 1 times my x, and that's going to give me a negative 1x. So negative 1x, right? I'm going to take the negative 1, and this is where it's important. I'm going to times it by negative 7. Well, a negative times a negative makes a positive 7. So here's my positive 7. And then again, remember, in algebra, if you do it to one thing, you got to do it to everything. So I'm going to take it even way past the equal sign and times the negative 1 times the negative 15, and that will change it to positive. So, we kind of call this subtraction because we're using a negative 1, but I'm kind of using it to let you know the difference between our videos. Because in the end, we're still going to actually add them up. It's just the fact that we have to use negative 1 in order to transform one of these 7s into an opposite. And take a look, that's what we have. We have a negative 7 and a positive 7. And that gives us our opposites. So now we can just add everything up. So we have 4 plus negative 1 is 3x. These make 0. You don't have to show that. And then this time we got 3 plus 15. We get 18. And then we just have a simple one-step equation. Divide by the 3. Divide by the 3. X equals 6. Right? And then all we do is we're going to take this 6 and plug it back into one of our equations. So I'll do that right over here. So I'm going to take my x value and I'm going to plug it in up here. So make sure you have this copied down. If you need to hit pause right now, do that. But make sure you know that we use negative 1 to transform the 7s into an opposite. So I'm going to take my negative 6, and I'm just going to plug it into this one. So I'm going to go 4. I'm not going to go 6x anymore. I'm going to go 6 minus 7y equals 3. All right, so there's my equation. I'm going to draw a little line here. That's will make a 24 minus 7y equals 3 minus 24 from both sides. And then I get a negative 7y equals a negative 21. Right? And then we just divide by negative 7. divide by -7, and then my y becomes a +3. And so what's my final answer? Remember, it looks like a point, 6, 3. Right? So the difference in today's lesson is just using this large -1 to multiply it by one of the equations. I could have done it to the top. But remember, the key thing is opposites. You always have to have opposites for elimination. And if you don't have them, but you have the same number, use a -1 to transform one of them into a positive or a negative, and then you just solve it like we actually did last lesson. So I'll do probably one more example, and then we have this lesson in the bag. All right, so here's example number 2. We simply have a 2x plus 4y equals 22, and a 2x minus 2y equals -8. So if we look at this closely, we still do not have true opposites. We do have a positive and a negative, but it's not the same number. That's a 4, that's a 2. That's not an opposite. These guys, that's a +2, that's a +2. Same number, but again, these guys don't have the different signs. So we have no opposites. So our first step is we have to turn one of these equations into an opposite. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to pick the bottom number. So I'm going to put my little -1 right here. And I'm going to multiply it by everything here. And then I'm going to very carefully rewrite it next to it. So instead of a 2x, the -1 will make it a -2x. Instead of a -2y, again, this is the important one, is that's going to change this. No, I'm sorry, this was the important one. Because it's going to change this to a -2, making an opposite. But let me just finish everything else, because I can't stop. So -1 times a -2y makes a +2y. A -1 times a -8 will make a +8. And then I'm just going to keep this one exactly the same, right? So I'm just going to move that one over. So that's a 2x plus a 4y equals a 22, right? Now, at this point, we now have opposites. And that's the only step that we're doing different from the last lesson. So here we go. Again, these are opposites, so they cancel each other out. 4 plus 2 is 8y equals, then you just add these up. 22 plus 8 makes a 30. And that is not an 8y, that is a 6y. I multiplied, don't do that. Add it, so sorry about that. So you go 4 plus 2 is 6y, not 8. I'm not going to go back and edit my video. I just let you know I make mistakes too, so it's okay if you do, but always go back and check your work. So I'm going to divide by 6, and my y equals, on this time I found the letter y, okay, not x. So remember, the x is canceled out on this one. So I'm going to take this y, I'm going to put it back into one of these equations. It does not matter which one. If you don't like negative numbers, then use the top one. It does not matter. So I'm going to take this, throw it back up here. I'm going to put it in for this y. So I'm going to use this equation. So I'm going to go 2x plus 4. But again, I'm not going to use my y. I'm going to use my number 5. 5 equals 22. All right? So that is 2x plus 4 times 5 equals 22. So that's 2x. That's going to be 4 times 5 is 20 equals 22. Now it's just a two-step equation. Minus the 20, minus the 20, and we get 2. The 2x falls down. Divide by 2, and x equals 1. And then put your answer together. Remember, x is first, even though we found it second, and a point. X is always first, then followed by the y. Right? So make sure that you do get all this